Well, folks, I had a few people asking, in fact a few people have been asking since the engine swaps became purchasable in GT7 to do some more cash cow event builds to keep things fresh. Of course, I did a ton of different tunes because even though once you've got one you don't really need to do more, it is still fun to change things up. Now for this particular one, it is a car which was requested, more so in a general sense because the Skylines R32, 33 and 34 can all have some pretty sweet engine swaps. In the case of this one, I'm running an R92CP engine, which is pretty expensive. It's 1.6 million, unless of course you've already won the engine on a spin, which I doubt many of us had prior to this anyway, but maybe some have. And I chose this one because I just like the R34, seemed like a good a place as any to jump off with. This is not a build where you're going to necessarily do the whole race without pitting in at all, because I am running the most horsepower out of this engine that you can get, nearly 1,000 horses with the mid-range turbo. Now, of course, it goes without saying, you do need to do the engine swap. In terms of the specific point level, this will definitely change. And it's one of the problems with these cash cow builds fitting so closely to 700 points, because with future updates, it can mess around with that to no end. So if you're watching this video down the line and the points don't come out the same as mine, then don't be surprised, because that does tend to change. You might need to unfit things or swap around the horsepower or the weight a bit to get it to fit within 700. At the moment, it's exactly on 700 points, though, as you can see. Now, I've opted to jump to the ultimate end of the spectrum to not fit any of this particular stuff. Then, for the extreme section, I do have NOS, but you don't need that for this build because, of course, you cannot use this in the cash cow event. I do, however, have intermediate tyres, which serve two purposes primarily. One, it allows you to have basically racing tyres but without as much of a point level penalty. So for example, if you compare that to hard tyres, these are a good, say, 20 to 30 points less on most cars, and that gives you so much more room to play with. They're not quite as good, of course, but with four-wheel drive, it makes up for that. And Le Mans is mostly about straight line power anyway when it comes to this race. Then, the second advantage is the weather. When it does get rainy, of course, intermediates, even with four-wheel drive, do make the car even better. The only downside to them really is that they do tend to wear out more quickly when the track's dry. Thankfully, the four-wheel drive counteracts that, though. As far as the upgrades, the race silencer comes with the engine anyway. There's not a huge amount else that you can do to the engine, but it's not like it really needs it. We've got the racing brakes and pads, of course, suspension, clutch. The torque vectoring diff is always something I'd recommend having on a four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive car. The racing hard tyres you don't need. I had those from a previous build, not for this particular one. We've got the fully customised transmission. As far as the semi-racing stuff, again, I believe the fully customised ECU comes with the engine anyway, which would make sense, of course, with the race engine. The fully customised diff. Then as far as the club sports section, you might want the power restrictor. It could come in handy for different events, or as I said, if the point level changes. We've got the ballast fitted as well. You will need to be using that. And for the sports section, only the stage 1 weight loss, because technically even stage 1 immediately takes you over 700 points, so you will need to add a few kilos here and there, in fact quite a few kilos, to get it up to a level that you can use. Now, of course, the other visuals do alter the point level as well, so for reference, I do have the wide body fitted. As you can see, I do have upgraded rims. They're not particularly large in terms of rim size, but they are larger in terms of width and placement. So, they've got spaces in effect. So you will need to factor that into your build. I do have the different rear wing, as you can see. I haven't really altered the body itself in terms of skirts, though. So if you do stuff like changing the chin splitter, especially changing the diffuser on the back, that will affect your points. So you will need to keep an eye on that kind of thing. As far as the tuning, though, we've got the intermediates fitted. As far as the suspension, I've lowered the ride height to 95mm, so about 10 higher than stock, or higher than the lowest I should say, not higher than stock. We've got 4 on anti-roll, 35 for the compression on the dampers, 40 for rebound, 3 on the frequency, front and rear, only 1 degree of camber. It's not like you really need it, it's four-wheel drive, it's relatively heavy, and it's already got a super wide track, so it's pretty stable to begin with. We've got a little bit of toe, excuse me, we've got a little bit of toe even, toe in, 0.10 on the front, toe out, or the other way around, even. Toe in, 0.10 on the rear, I should have said, and toe out on the front. Then as far as the diff, We've got 10 for initial torque, 30 for acceleration, and 20 for braking, a 50-50 split, which of course comes in very handy, especially when the weather gets worse. NOS is not fitted, as I said. For the fully customized transmission, I initially ran it with a 400 km/h setup, which is about 250 miles an hour. You don't really need it to be that high for Le Mans, so I lowered it a bit to 380. The power restrictor and the ECU are not touched. As I said though, I do have quite a lot of ballast, 197 kilos, and that is put a little bit toward the back, just getting us right on that 700 point level. And with the swapped out rear wing, we do have the downforce set as low as it can go. Of course, over here, you can see all the other stuff that's fitted. What few things there are, that is, that are fitted. So that's it for the build. Of course, we'll jump back out for those who don't know what the Cash Cow event is. You will need to progress through the cafe in order to unlock it. I feel like most players are already at a point where they could do this, but for those who are maybe newer to the game, jump over to Europe. Then you want, of course, Circuit de la Sarthe, aka Le Mans, and then you want the center event, the World Touring Car 700 point event. 550,000 credits, of course, and as long as you don't get a penalty, so you can go off track, you can get all those kind of penalties, the only one that actually matters, at least from my experience, is make sure you don't ignore a yellow flag. So don't overtake a car if somebody's had a crash. The problem with that is sometimes they'll try and catch you out with it, where they'll suddenly flash it up on screen and you don't have time to brake. I actually had that happen in this exact car. That's pretty much the only way that you can lose the bonus. You can bash other cars, you can, go over corners. I still wouldn't recommend it because it wastes time, but that's the only penalty that actually matters. So in other words, you will be getting about 825,000 every time you do the race. So in other words, although the engine is expensive at 1.6 million, 2 events and the engine has already paid for itself. And they are very, very easy events indeed, because even if you pit in, which of course you'll have to generally, running the lowest, the leanest power setting, you're still running over 200 miles an hour easily on the straights, lap times of barely over 4 minutes. Of course, it's super easy to drive anyway, let alone with 1,000 horsepower to demolish everything on the straights. And of course, as you can see now out on the track, it's a pleasure to work with. I mean, it's already a Skyline, so it's already great, it's already fast, it's already a strong all-rounder. This engine just makes it into even more of an OP machine. I know that plenty of you are already using like R32s with this kind of build. I haven't personally built a 32 or 33 yet using this kind of idea, but the 34 is where I wanted to kind of step off and begin with. So of course, if you want to try this one out, or any of the other very many Cash Cow tunes that I've done on the channel, of course, check those out and enjoy them. They are very varied and all over the place. And of course, I will see you with more in future. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.